The point is to see how it relates to you now, because you learn from whatever the stories, the laws, but it's how do you make it relevant to today that's important.
I agree.
And it's also, we have a very wide spectrum of people and people's interests and ages.
Of course, of course. And I mean, one of the comments to the rabbi this weekend was how I don't know if you heard it or if it was on Thursday night, how there's 120 core members and you should be, I'm trying to say it politely, talking to them. And I disagree. You have to be talking to the 780 who aren't showing up to get them to show up and make the 120, 180 or 200. So how can you find me or somebody else to show up, more regularly? That's I think the crux of what the clergy has to do.
That's what all the synagogues are struggling with.
Of course.
It's very hard to get people to come into shul.
It's not just synagogues. I can tell you that. I've been on the board at my tennis club, and I was the youngest member when I was 20, and I'm the youngest member at 63. So there's a problem there.
Well, therein lies the challenge. And the challenge, for me anyways, is to always try to make Torah relevant, no matter how outdated it seems. You can always find a connection, and that's our challenge. And I think that's why we still open books that are literally 2,000 years old, such as the case this morning. So we are moving through the third chapter of Pirkei Avot, and which seemingly are, tidbits of sayings and little pearls of advice and wisdom. Of course, the last book of codified Jewish law, the last book of the Mishnah. And let's see what Rabbi Akiva says. So this is the famous Rabbi Akiva in Mishnah number 13. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Schok v'kalut rosh margilin le'erva. So schok, being too, laughy, too much of a jokester. The kalut rosh, literally being dull of the head. How does Safaria? Merriment and frivolity. Okay. Margilin le'erva, lead to acts of lewdness. Masoret, siag la Torah. Tradition is a siag, is a fence around the Torah. So this concept of a fence around the Torah is a very famous concept within Judaism. Things like muktzah on Shabbat, where we don't even touch the pen, even though we can't write. So not only do we not write, we don't even touch the pen, because if you touch the pen, then you may write. So we're very into these protective barriers. So Rabbi Akiva is telling us that the value of tradition is a barrier around the Torah. And to me, that means that it protects the Torah. Ma'asrot siag la'osher. Maser, the giving of tithes, which is the giving of 10% of your crops to charity, is a fence around wealth. Nedarim, vows, siag la prishut, are a fence to abstinence. And siag la chokhmah, a fence around wisdom, is shtika, silence. So, some bold statements here from Rabbi Akiva. Any thoughts? So, frivolity and merriment lead to sexual licentiousness. That's
licentiousness.
Yes, sir.
I have maybe a comment. It seems in some of these instances, the fence is negative and in others, the fence is positive.
Okay.
So,
Such as?
Well, I guess the fence around the Torah is positive. The fence around the wealth seems to be a negative connotation there. You're guarding your wealth by giving away the tithe, not rather than, and the last one seems to be offense to wisdom is silence. I find that, well, maybe that's my personality, keeping quiet and listening, you learn a lot.
Yeah. So I would think that it's saying. See, this is so interesting because I had the exact opposite thought, right? That the siag, that the fence is actually a positive thing. That in order to really safeguard Torah, you need masoret. In order to safeguard wealth, you actually need to give. In order to safeguard, abstinence, you need to actually make vows. And in order to safeguard your own wisdom, you need to be quiet and open your ears to absorb. There's actually a very famous interpretation. Maser from the Torah, the actual commandment is phrased aser te'aser, that you tenth you should tithe. And a lot of commentaries interpret this and say, and then you will be asher ta'ashir, and then you will be wealthy. So it's the same shoresh, it's the same root word. And so the thought is that through acts of charity, you will actually amass wealth. So don't think that you have to keep everything to be wealthy. It's actually giving. Any other thoughts?
So who says that wealth has anything to do with money?
Yeah, I was thinking the same way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's true.
Okay, because later on we're going to learn about who is wealthy.
Right.
Okay,
so
this is how I live my life. Okay, because the person, what does it say? The person who is wealthy is content with what he has.
Yeah.
I know that some people who are very wealthy, they don't give charity for one reason or another. But are they? The problem with wealth is, I'm just thinking out loud if I can. The problem with wealth is the more you have, the more you need. Not the more you want, the more you need. Because those people that don't have a lot of money make do with what they had. I remember my father telling me when they were young, okay, they didn't have a lot of money. As a matter of fact, it was so cold in the house, they used to put a glass of water on the kitchen table the night before they went to bed. And they knew it was cold when the water turned to ice. Okay, this is what they lived. But the truth was, he says he was very happy growing up and he didn't feel that he was missing anything. And I'm sure that they gave charity because that's like, I didn't pick it up out of the air. Okay, and so I think that it has to do with that. If you give money, you feel good giving. I feel fabulous giving. I would have a hard time receiving, especially from my kids. When they give me something, I say, oh, okay, I want to give them. I don't want them to give me. Right. That to me is wealth.
Beautiful. I just actually thought of the famous story. I'm sure some of you know that I'm very active with March of the Living. So I've had the opportunity to go to Poland maybe 10 times. And there's a famous story about the King of Krakow in the 14th century, 15th century. The chief rabbi, I forget his name. His wife was Miriam. Anyways, was not a wealthy man. And the King of Krakow actually really favored the Jews. And Jews had, very good life considering. And the chief rabbi was often in the king's court and would, advise him and, liaise with him. And the king noticed that Friday afternoon that the rabbi always had to leave, sort of earlier. And he decides to follow him. One Friday decides to follow him, and he follows him home. And he sees the rabbi change out of his weekday suit and put on a nice white shirt. And he's in a very modest apartment. And he sits down at the Shabbos table, and the king is looking in through the window and sees what true wealth is. And it's not having a kingdom. It's hasamech bechalko. It's being happy with what you have. Yeah. Let's go on and see what else he says. Hu haya omer. So we're still on Rabbi Akiva. Chaviv adam shenivra b'tselem. Beloved is a person shenivra b'tselem, as we are created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Chiba yetera nodaat lo shenivra b'tselem. Shenemar ki b'tselem Elokim aseh et ha'adam. Chiba yetera. An everlasting hug. Nodat lo shenivra b'tselem, is known to him that is created in the image of Hashem, as it is said in the Torah Breshit, ki b'tselem Elokim asa et ha'adam, because in the image of God was a person created. Let's just see how it's far. You say, beloved is man, for he was created in the image of God. Especially beloved is he, for it was made known to him that he had been created in the image of God. As it is said, so it's one thing that we're created in the image of God. It's another thing that we actually know that we actually were told that we are created in the image of God. Chavivin Yisrael shenikreu banim lamakom. Beloved are us Israel, as we are called children of lamakom, of Hashem. So first of all, Rabbi Akiva was very famous about love of Hashem, love of Torah, love of each other, right? The famous thing, right? So love really played a big part in his teachings. Beloved are we because we are called children of Hashem, as it is said in Devarim, Banim atem laHashem Elokechem. Children are you to Hashem. Chavivin Yisrael shenitan lahem kli chemda. Beloved is Israel, as we are given kli chemda, a vessel that's very, very precious. I'm assuming he's talking about the Torah. Chiba yetera nodat lehem shenitan lehem kli chemda shebo nivra ha'olam. Beloved are we that we know that Hashem gave us this precious vessel, shebo nivra ha'olam, with which the world was created. Shene'emar, as it says in the book of Mishle, ki lekach tov natati lachem. For a good lekach is a very hard word to translate. A good doctrine, natati lachem, I have given you, torati al ta'azovu, do not abandon torati, my Torah, my teaching. So Rabbi Akiva clearly is telling us how special we are. Do we find these two Mishnahs related? Any thoughts here?
So here's the fence. The fence is that we're precious. The fence is we're here to show the world that God's law is what it is, and we are special people. That's the fence. We are special.
So is that the fence, or is that what the fence guards?
Oh, what we want to do is we want to spread the law, the Torah. Okay, and so that's what the main issue is, I think. Okay, is to spread the Torah, and then he's saying, in order for us, well, we can spread the Torah because we are special people. Okay, we are like you're created, and not everybody's created in His image, but you, Jewish people, are the chosen people. That's what it's. That's how I read it.
Mm-hmm.
There's the fence.
I think
I find it
actually,
interesting that he keeps on using the word chiba, the hug, the love, preciousness. It's not yira. It's not fear. It's not,
It's not because we're going to get paid for what we're doing. It's for the love of it.
right.
It's not that we have to do it. For I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my law.
Mm-hmm.
The less written, the more is said, huh?
That's true. And he continues, Hakol tzafui v'hareshut netuna. This is a very, very famous saying. Hakol tzafui v'hareshut netuna. Everything is known. V'hareshut netuna. And freedom of choice is given. Uvetov ha'olam nidon. And the world is judged with favor. V'hakol lefi rov ha'maseh. And everything is lefi rov ha'maseh. With Rov HaMaaseh is hard to translate. The great act, the preponderance of works. Safari did an excellent job. So seemingly very contradictory. Hakol tzafui v'hareshut netuna. Everything is foreseen. So the Vav here is a very interesting letter because they translate it as yet, but hareshut netuna. You can also translate it hareshut netuna, and free choice is given. So how do those two live together? How is everything foreseen and yet, and we also have free choice?
There could be multiple possibilities, and those are all foreseen. And it's up to us to choose which direction we're going to go in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it as a contradiction.
Right. Because so if it's foreseen, it doesn't mean that it's predetermined. So there's that, right? That distinction. Just because something is foreseen doesn't mean that it's predetermined.
Just a minute, but who is foreseeing this?
Hashem.
Aha. So he knows what's going to happen. He knows what's going to happen. And yet he's giving us freedom of choice, but he knows which choice we're going to make. So we think that we have freedom of choice. But do we?
Right.
I don't know. Which is the path I should take?
Rabbi Akiva says we do.
I know which is the proper path. One that's good for me, for my fellow beings, and for God.
But it's hard to see sometimes. I mean, I'm sure we've all had, it could be anything from which apples to buy, to what job to take, to what school to send the kids to. There's countless of decisions where you don't always know the right answer. It's really only in hindsight. Maybe in hindsight, everything is always the right answer because that's what you did, And if it wasn't the right answer at the time, it's something that you hopefully learned from to, navigate back to center.
So we never make the wrong choice.
I don't think it's a question of right and wrong. There's
That's
no,
correct.
it's not whether you
You're right.
made the right
You're
choice
right.
or the wrong choice. It's what you do with that choice, what you make of it.
Right.
I mean, I'm not talking about deciding if you should like kill or steal or something like that, but which path do you go down, the left one or the right one? Does it really matter which one you pick? It matters what you do with what you pick.
Mm-hmm.
And it all comes back to, like, why do we study Torah? It's because we want to learn how to live a good life, a moral life. So it all comes back, like that's always in the background of all these Mishnot. I think that no matter what you do, you learn the Torah to use it, to learn how to live your life.
So if you choose a path and it's wrong, you will be able to see that it's wrong, and you'll go on the right path.
Well, wrong is relative. Wrong according to what?
That is correct.
Like how is it wrong? Just, I mean, you decide something. Do I buy apples or oranges today? Is if you buy apples, is that wrong? You should have bought oranges.
I mean, look,
or,
let's take a page out of Jeff's comments that actually opened the session with how is this relevant to today? There was a pandemic going on, right? So I'll tell you how many meetings and how many debates did I have with the rabbi, the board, people, members. Should we open? Shouldn't we open? It's davening, it's Torah, it's safe, it's outside, it's inside, but it's a pandemic. I mean, this was, and still is, very, very real. And what's the right answer? What's the right answer? Do we open? Do we not open? Right? It's like, and there's cases made for both sides. It's not a clear answer. Or if it's clear to, someone, it's certainly not clear to someone else. And we're talking about, worship and davening and prayer. So, hakol tzafoy b'reshut netuna. It's what's the right answer. And there perhaps is no right answer. There's just an answer.
There's a lot of things weighing on that in this particular element we're talking about prayer, because I think health is the number one item in anything. If you're fasting and you're sick, you're allowed to eat.
For sure.
If we have a pandemic, but we want to pray, we have to guard ourselves, everyone, whatever you want to say in this whole thing. So how do you adapt your style of prayer to still safeguard the community, which is what the synagogue, to all extent and purposes, has done.
Yep.
Even though the synagogue is open for 10 or 25 in the future, my personal choice would be not to go in there until such time that I feel safe.
Yeah.
And that will happen sooner or later. But that's the freedom of choice. Is it foreseen? I guess we're talking about it, so it's foreseen.
Right.
When I read that everything is foreseen, doesn't mean that it's predestined. It means the choices are there and you can see them, and now you make your choice, and you do it with hopefully the wisdom of making the right choice. Buying apples and oranges isn't exactly the same example, because it depends if you like apples or oranges. I would buy an orange anytime personally, but they're both good as long as they're good. As long as they aren't rotten, they're both good.
Or you have what often happens here at home is my kids love oranges on Monday, and on Tuesday they want nothing to do with oranges. So I buy the apples and the oranges.
I also think that when we make choices, we do it, well, in theory, with the information that we have in front of us, and we weigh it out. Sometimes it's a fast decision. It might not have been the best decision, but on things that are really important, you weigh it all out. Should I do this? And what happens if I do that? But only with the information that we have in front of us at the time. And it's
Right.
only in retrospect, after we've gone down a certain road and other things unfold, then we realize, was that the best choice? But it was the best choice at the time. And sometimes you can't go back and say, well, I should have, but how would you have known that bit of information wasn't available to you at the time?
Right.
So in my book, okay, it continues here, and the world is judged by goodness, and everything is according to the abundance of deeds. I don't know, is that written in there?
והכל לפי רוב המעשה. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
What does that mean, though? Vehakol, everything. What is everything?
everything has to be our choices.
Judgment?
Everything. Our life, our lives.
So there's nothing without action, which is actually something that we've seen time and time again throughout Pirkei Avot. It seems Torah, for the sake of just learning Torah, is falls short, and it's clear to me, anyways, that the rabbis really say Torah without action. I think the word that they used was bitul, was a waste. And now Rabbi Akiva is also saying, "V'akol lefi rov ha'maaseh." Everything is for rov ha'maaseh, action.
Everything, okay, and it says, and the world is judged by goodness. So you can do whatever you want, but the world is judged by goodness. In other words, I hope that we're doing good, and when we do good, okay, we're doing the right choice. We're selecting the right choice.
Right.
But Elliot, you're reading one interpretation, and the one Adam has up has a different translation, not interpretation. So I'm maybe cynical towards what we read in other than Hebrew, because it's over hundreds, if not thousands, of years that the
Right.
interpretation has changed in accordance with something. I don't know what.
With everything.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's in accordance with what happened, what developed over the course of 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay, when you read all the ancient writings, okay, the Talmud and the Gemara, it was written over hundreds of years. You would think that the rabbis were talking to each other, but they were like 200, 300 years apart when they were discussing different rules. And they said, according to this rabbi, we should do this. According to that rabbi, we should do that. And they're completely opposite. Then a third guy comes in and says, you're both right. And then the fourth guy comes in and says,
Well,
you're both wrong.
I mean, correct, but that's more the Gemara. So the Mishnah, is from the age of Tanaim, while they certainly lived throughout a span of, let's say, 200 years, they were there's this famous doctrine that the rabbis that came after Tanaim need to listen to the Tanaim. So even within debates, usually the debate ends with the conclusion they're both right. One is for the world now, one is for the world to come. Because arguing for the sake of Torah, there's no wrong answer, right? Because hakol tzafui, everything is foreseen. Something that really strikes me, to hear Rabbi Akiva say this, that the world is judged for good. If you think about the time of the world that he was living in, he very well could be saying this, hiding in a cave right now, fleeing, Roman persecution as part of the Bar Kokhba, revolt, and to still have this outlook of being loved, being special. We should see that we're loved by Hashem, but he was not a loved person. He was hunted and caught and then killed, right, brutally. And to hear him say, and he was perhaps somewhat of a zealot that would not abandon his actions, his principles, his Torah. And he's saying it's all right, vehakol, and everything, lefi, according, rov, many, maaseh, action, right? So I also don't like to really, overinterpret the Hebrew. I'm always, first and foremost, pshat. What's the shorish of the word? And to me, it's clear that he's saying that everything is about maaseh, your actions. But it's just interesting, just keep in mind who he was, where he was, and what he was going through. He lost
an optimist.
thousands of students.
But he was an optimist. He always saw the glasses half full, not the glasses half empty. So this is where he's coming from. He's always looking at things in a positive way, no matter how bad it was around him.
Right.
Okay, everybody.
Bye, Marilyn. Shavua Tov. Enjoy
Shavuot Tov.
Asher's
Sorry to leave
class. If anyone wants to brush up on their sitter skills, navigate the Sidur. Asher has a Zoom link somewhere. I think it's on the website or on emails. Shavua Tov, everyone.
Shavuot Tov. Thank you.